The collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria and the withdrawal of Russian troops from the country has come as a shock and humiliation to Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and could affect his position in the war in Ukraine, the Telegraph writes. Hannah Notte, a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, called Russia's retreat an embarrassing failure. In recent years, Russia has always blamed Ukraine and its Western backers for its mistakes and embarrassments, she said. It may try to do the same with Assad's fall, but rhetorical gymnastics will not work. It cannot distract from the fact that this is a defeat. Various think tanks have calculated that Putin spends £2 million a day on maintaining his troops in Syria. However, the Telegraph reports that the war in Ukraine is his priority, so he may have ordered that no missiles or warplanes be allocated to defend Assad. At the same time, Kremlin propagandists are already preparing a justification for such a retreat, the publication writes. For example, they blamed the collapse on a broad Western plot to undermine Russia. They also stopped calling the Syrian rebels terrorists, calling them militia instead, a sign that the Kremlin had accepted their victory and was preparing to negotiate. At the same time, as the Telegraph writes, the collapse of the Assad regime will have serious consequences for the Kremlin's strategy in the Middle East as well as in Africa and may also affect the internal Russian regime, noted analyst Mark Galeotti. At the same time, analysts warned that the shock of the rapid collapse of the Assad regime could also affect the prospects for peace in Ukraine, further hardening Putin's uncompromising stance. As Russia analyst Tatiana Stanovaya noted, the war in Ukraine has cost Putin some of Syria, and he will now be less inclined to demonstrate flexibility. Recall on December the 8th, the Syrian army command informed officers about the fall of the regime of President Bashar al-Assad. Russia subsequently stated that Assad peacefully left the presidency and left Syria. As ISW analysts note, after the fall of the Assad regime, Putin may lose his military bases in Syria, and this threatens the Kremlin with serious consequences. According to analysts, the loss of Russian bases in Syria will likely disrupt Russian logistics as well as its efforts to replenish supplies and rotate the African core. Russia's operations and force projection in Libya and sub-Saharan Africa will be particularly affected.
An Associated Press journalist in Damascus reported airstrikes in the area of the Meza military airport, southwest of the capital Sunday. The airport has previously been targeted in Israeli airstrikes, but it was not immediately clear who launched Sunday's strike. The Israeli military refused to comment on the airport strike. Israel often does not publicly claim responsibility for attacks in Syria. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israeli forces have seized a buffer zone in the Golan Heights established by a 1974 ceasefire agreement with Syria. He spoke on Sunday after a lightning rebel advance ended Syrian President Bashar Assad's rule. Netanyahu said the decades-old agreement had collapsed and that Syrian troops had abandoned their positions, necessitating the Israeli takeover. Israel captured the Golan Heights in the 1967 Mideast War and annexed it. The international community, except for the United States, views it as occupied Syrian territory.
الله أكبر. 10 سنين. الله أكبر. مساجين يحيى. الله أكبر. ايش اللي صار؟ سقط النظام. لا إلهي مساجين.
سوري واحد. الشعب السوري واحد. الشعب السوري واحد. الشعب السوري واحد. أنا قرايبهم ملعوني. وكلمات